You are about to witness the very exciting story that will open new sight to familiar surroundings.
The atomic age was born.
It is a story of a city seeking new horizons in a resolute contest with great challenges.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Green Time. I'm your host, John Hickey from the Missouri Sierra Club. And on today's episode, we look at the issue of coal ash contamination. There's been a lot of national news coverage about the spill in North Carolina where Duke Energy spilled 82,000 tons of coal ash into the Dan River. Could something like that happen here in Missouri? We have two guests to help us understand that question. Let me introduce them to you. First, Patricia Schuba from the Labadie Environmental Organization, or LEO, from Franklin County. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And then Gary Kappler, a Sierra Club member from Jefferson County, down by Festus.
Right.
Well, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Channel 24.
And let me start with you, Patricia. What is coal ash? For most of our viewers who probably never got up in the morning and talked about coal ash.
Like me 5 years ago?
There you go.
Yeah, coal ash is what's left after the burning of coal. So we burn a lot of coal in the United States, and we make roughly 160,000 tons, or 160 million tons of coal combustion waste in the United States, and it has to go somewhere. So it gets dumped in these ponds and landfills in our floodplains. And
you've got an example close to you, Gary, in Crystal City, where there's a big coal ash dump.
Yes, we do.
What's that about?
There's a company called Rotary Drilling, which is within the city limits of Festus, and they decided that they were going to use fill to fill in a wetlands, which is adjacent to their company, and then use it as a building site for a bank. And what they did, they used, instead of using clean fill, they used coal ash fill for this, filling in this wetland. And they used a total of 140,000 tons of coal ash to fill in this wetland. Uh-huh. And they had no permits or anything to do this. They just went ahead and filled in this wetland, and unfortunately, the people around that area are stuck with it now. And I have friends that live close to that area, and I'm sure that, I've talked to them, and they said that, that it's just a real mess because this toxic coal ash has all kinds of toxic metals and substances in it. And it's also adjacent to the Elks Club Lake. And an interesting story is that my grandson is in the Scouts, in the Cub Scouts, and he's a Weeblo too. And last summer, they had a day camp at the Elks. And they asked me if since I'm a retired guy, if I would mind, with two other retirees, teaching a fishing seminar to teach the Scouts how to fish. And I said, yeah, sure. It's right up my alley. And so this went on for 5 days, and the whole time I was down there, you could look across the lake and see this mountain of coal ash over there, adjacent to this lake where these kids are fishing at. Mm-hmm. And I thought, this is insane, and right now
no cover.
Yeah.
No cover at all. Mm-hmm.
No cover, nothing, just open. And the EPA is investigating it, and right now the Army Corps of Engineers turned this site in to the EPA. And the EPA is now going through their investigation and their process to try to figure out what's to be done with this.
And what is interesting about that is one of the recommendations from an environmental company that was brought in was to remove all the material from the site. and relocate it to a landfill.
When, as I understand it, because of the heavy metal contaminants
Right.
leaking out of the coal ash,
Right.
that there were fish kills downstream from there, and that's one of the ways that the initial dumping was discovered, was because of downstream neighbors noticing the dead
We
fish.
actually went out to the site, and there were fish dying in the lake and a dead fish that we filmed. And they tested the water in that lake, and there were elevated levels of arsenic.
In the lake that the Boy Scouts were
Exactly.
fishing.
As you look up
Right.
and see a mound of coal ash above you, yes. Very obviously the source.
The well, tell me a little bit more, Patricia. What's in coal ash? You mentioned arsenic.
Right, and
What else
Gary
is in it?
did. There's arsenic, there's lead, there's aluminum, there's a thing called hexavalent chromium, which is a very carcinogenic form of chromium that we all know from a famous movie and a famous woman who studied that and got a huge settlement for damages, Erin Brockovich. So there's serious, and arsenic. Arsenic is a primary cause of cancer. And all these things leach readily into water, and then they bioaccumulate in watery environments, so in fish and plants. So once it leaches out from the coal ash, it's in the environment we all share. So it increases the risk of cancers around a site by about 50% over your lifetime of certain cancers. So it's pretty serious.
Wow, 50%.
Yes.
That's a lot. Well, I want to get back to the Boy Scouts. Are they still doing fishing at the Elks there at the lake?
Well, as far as I know, they're going to keep having these day camps there. What's going to happen with, I don't know what the Elks Club is going to do, you know, with the situation as it is. And we're still kind of waiting to see what the EPA is going to say. So it's kind of in limbo right now.
Okay. Okay, well, so coal ash is a problem here in Missouri. Coal ash is one of the downsides of our dependence on coal. Let's watch a short movie for more.
It's hard to believe that nearly 40% of our country's electricity still comes from coal, a dirty, outdated energy source. Coal not only causes health problems, but it's also the main contributor to climate disruption. Just how bad is coal? In mountaintop removal mining, coal companies clear-cut forests and literally blow the tops off mountains to get the coal. This process dumps millions of tons of waste into our streams and poisons our drinking water. But mining coal is only the beginning. Burning coal generates smog, which can cause asthma attacks, chest pains, and breathing problems. In fact, 1 out of 10 children in the U.S. suffers from asthma, and it's the #1 reason kids miss school due to illness. The pollution from burning coal leads to 12,000 emergency room visits and more than $100 billion in health costs every year. Coal pollution also contains toxic mercury that damages the nervous system and is especially dangerous for babies and young children because it can cause developmental problems. Mercury rains down into our oceans, rivers, and lakes, contaminating our fish and seafood. And even after coal is burned, the waste that's left over is bad for our health. Each year, coal plants generate more than 140 million tons of toxic waste called coal ash that's stored in thousands of pits across the country. Enough toxic waste to fill more than 400,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Living near a toxic coal ash pit can be worse for kids' health than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. The good news is that the United States has become an international leader in reducing carbon pollution, largely because we are retiring coal plants and replacing them with clean, renewable energy nationwide. The amount of electricity America gets from wind and solar power has more than doubled in the past few years. Iowa and South Dakota are already getting more than 20% of their energy from wind power. And in 2012, 10 states got more than 10% of their energy from wind. Coal is making us sick, and it's time to make this toxic, outdated energy source history. Let's create a clean energy future for our country and for our kids. Let's move beyond coal.
We are the Junior Black Chamber of Commerce, an organization that's creating the business leaders of tomorrow. Catch our new television series, Harambe 101, on Green Time TV. We want to thank all the business professionals who gave up their time mentoring what promises to be the next generation of movers and shakers. You too can help save the future of our underserved communities by supporting the Junior Black Chamber of Commerce with your charitable contributions. And remember, what you give today will help make a brighter future tomorrow.
Send your donations to the JBCC at P.O. Box 35257, St. Louis, Missouri 63135.
The Sierra Club is the largest and most influential grassroots environmental organization in the United States. If you care about clean air, clean water, and preserving open space, join the Sierra Club. In Missouri, the Sierra Club's projects include promoting energy efficiency and clean power sources like wind and solar, cleaning up air pollution by retiring dirty, outdated, coal-fired power plants, protecting Missouri's parks like the Ozark National Scenic Riverways. We need you to get more involved. To join the Sierra Club, make a donation, or to find out about Sierra Club events in your area, visit our website at www.missouri.sierraclub.org or call us at 314-644-1011.
Welcome back to Green Time. On today's episode, we're talking about coal ash and its impact on the environment. We've got two knowledgeable guests with us to discuss that matter. First, again, Patricia Schuba from the Labadie Environmental Organization, or LEO, and Gary Kappler, a Sierra Club member from Jefferson County. And Gary was talking about this particular coal ash dump in Crystal City. You also live near a coal ash dump, ash ponds there next to the Labadie coal plant. What's the status of those ponds?
Absolutely. Labadie is the largest plant in the state and arguably amongst the largest in the nation. And as a result, they've made a lot of coal ash. And so they have two existing ponds, large ponds. And one of the ponds, the oldest one, we know to have been leaking since at least 1992 from some permits that they issued, or some documentation for permits with the state.
1992?
1992.
That's over 20 years ago.
That is over 20 years ago. And when our organization and Sierra Club started asking questions about that, we got some action by Ameren. They made some corrections, tried to stem the leakage from 4 visible leaks. Now you might ask, or you might say they've solved the problem, and I would say that this is an unlined pond. So it's basically scooped out into the sediment of a floodplain, and a floodplain is loose soils. So basically it's a leaky bathtub. It's like a sieve. So what we know of are these 4 leaks, and they've tried to divert that water. They can't stop up the leak, they can divert it. We would argue, and many have, that it's probably been leaking since it was put in the floodplain, which was about 40 years ago. If you look at the amount that's coming out of the leaks, it's about 50,000 gallons per day. And you may not think that's a whole lot, but when you add that up over 20 years, that's 365 million gallons of wastewater that could have heavy metal ions moving through the floodplain. And our state regulators, EPA, no one has demanded testing around those ponds. As organizations, we have requested that of the DNR, and we've requested of Governor Nixon to intervene.
Even after the disaster in North Carolina and other states, there's still no groundwater testing in Missouri?
No, and there's actually, with information out of North Carolina, we know that anywhere they test, they find contamination. This is true nationwide. So if you look over in Illinois, in the 1990s, they began some testing at some of their power plants. We have one of those power plants right across from the Arch. That's the Venice power plant. It stopped accepting ash in 1977. And when they tested around that plant, they found elevated arsenic, elevated boron. They're showing boron 600 feet off site, and it's actually entered into the Mississippi River. So that's Ameren on the other side of the river, and on this side of the river we have no testing. I would say that's the only reason we don't know about contamination at Labadie or Rush Island or any of the other plants in the state. And we have 32 ponds like this in Missouri.
So if we were on the Illinois side of the river, as some of our viewers are, we could rest assured that the state required groundwater monitoring next to these coal ash disposal sites. But if you live on the Missouri side of the river, too bad. There's not groundwater monitoring, and you got to cross your fingers.
And there's actually an organization in Illinois, Prairie Rivers Network, that has looked at the testing done in Illinois. And in 2006, they did some extensive testing, and over 2 years of 28 ponds, and every single one of them had contamination. So it's not just North Carolina, that where you check around all the Duke ponds, you find pollution. It's also in Illinois, and I would argue in just about any state you look.
Wow.
So I think here in Missouri, we deserve the same.
I agree.
Gary and his family, my family, we all deserve to know what's happening at these ponds, and for our regulatory agencies to demand that it be cleaned up.
Isn't the ash pond next to the Rush Island plant similar, Gary, in the sense it just scooped out of the floodplain, and the bottom of the pond is below the top of the water table?
Well, actually, Labadie and the Merrimack Ameren plant and the Rush Island plant are all three in floodplains. And the ash pond at the Rush Island plant is about 103 acres, and it's unlined. And I even knew an employee that worked there at one time, and he told me, I think it was back in the flood of '83 when he worked there, that whole facility was underwater, you know. And so basically, it just makes common sense, and you can talk to the most conservative person in the world, and he'll agree with you that you shouldn't put toxic ash ponds in floodplains. You know, it just doesn't make sense. And
we actually had a farmer who said to me, as we had some regulators touring the bottoms, he said, Patricia and I may not agree on anything talking about our politics. He said, but everybody agrees this is a stupid place to put coal ash. So it's a pretty universally accepted premise by people who understand these floodplains. And if you drive into a floodplain, you'll see the groundwater actually comes up through the floodplain and is above the surface. So it's insane to dig out these cavities, some of them 85 feet deep, to put this waste in. It makes no sense. When you know the connection between these heavy metals and carcinogens and disease in people.
Well, that's a good break point. We have coal ash disposal sites, ponds, landfills across the state. Springfield, Missouri, St. Louis, Kansas City, Columbia, and the Sierra Club is fighting to make sure that these coal ash ponds are safe. Let's look at a short video about the Sierra Club.
Hi everyone, I'm Michael Brune, Executive Director of the Sierra Club, the largest and most effective environmental organization in the country. The Sierra Club was established in 1892, and over the years our members have helped to protect hundreds of millions of acres of some of the most beautiful places in the country. We have also been a part of almost every major piece of bedrock environmental legislation. But today, in the 21st century, the top challenge facing humanity is climate change. And it's the top priority of the Sierra Club. We want to do for clean energy what John Muir did for wilderness preservation more than a century ago. And we're already beginning to make great progress. Even though the climate is destabilizing before our very eyes with extreme weather like severe storms, wildfires, record droughts across the U.S. and across the world, clean energy is taking hold like never before. Our members have helped to retire more than 150 dirty coal-fired power plants across the country. We've been able to strengthen a movement against fracking all across the U.S. We've helped to organize the largest demonstration on climate change in U.S. history, and we're working every day to turn away from extreme fuels like dirty oil from the tar sands and embrace solar and wind energy. But through all of this work on climate and clean energy, the Sierra Club remains connected to its roots. Every year, we help to get more than 250,000 people into the outdoors. For many folks, it's their first wilderness experience. And Sierra Club members are working to protect some of the most important places in the United States, from the canyonlands of Utah to the Arctic up in Alaska to the Florida Everglades. None of this would be possible without you. The Sierra Club employs almost every strategy and tactic you can think of, from litigation to lobbying, grassroots organizing, social media, etc. All of this is done by Sierra Club members and volunteers. So join us. We're going to do great things together.
Since 1990, the Gateway Green Alliance has worked on environmental and social justice campaigns in St. Louis.
The Gateway Greens have brought dedicated activists to speak at Black and Green Wednesday programs, the annual Pesto Feast, Martin Luther King Day, May Day, and Kwanzaa celebrations.
The Gateway Green Alliance is best known for opposing genetically contaminated foods. We invite activists and scholars from around the world to participate in safe food action and bring their creative art.
We need your support to keep going. Please send your $60 membership check or your $30 low-income check. Best of all, come to a Black and Green Wednesday program, 7:30 p.m. on the first Wednesday of the month at Legacy Books and Cafe.
What if we were served a side of truth?
I'll take a super bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich.
Okay, that'll be meat from a pig who can't even turn around, an egg from a bird kept in a cage so small she can't spread her wings, and the milk of a cow whose calf is taken at birth to make veal. Ma'am?
Hello and welcome back to Green Time. On today's episodes, we're talking about coal ash and its effects on groundwater and pollution in the state of Missouri. We've got two guests who are helping us understand this problem. We've got Patricia Schuba from the Labadie Environmental Organization and Gary Kappler with the Sierra Club. And we've been talking before the break about these coal ash ponds that sit in the floodplains. And that are in contact with the water table so that the heavy metal pollution goes from the coal ash into the groundwater. Does anybody in the Labadie area still drink out of wells?
Absolutely. We almost all do. Surrounding the power plant, we have 100 or more private wells, and we have 2 large, deep level wells that are used by communities. And so, yes, we do. And I would argue that the impact from these ponds has more impact than just on local wells. We also discharge to the river, so it impacts people downstream that pull off water for their communities like St. Louis County or St. Louis City to drink that water. And from the Dan River spill, we know that solid waste, at least from these coal ash ponds, can end up 70 miles away. And no one knows how far the ions in these metals travel and how they recycle in the bottom of rivers.
So, just so people in TV land heard that, what you're saying is that people in St. Louis who
think they're
have
far
public
away.
water and think, oh, it's safe,
right.
That's water from the Missouri River,
right.
And it's downstream from ththese coal ash ponds at Labadie you were just telling us about.
Right, and there's 50 to 60% of Missourians drink from the Missouri River. We do. And it's interesting because you can ask people, you can say, do you know where your drinking water comes from? And most people do not. So the people...
The faucet.
Right. And the faucet is connected by a big long pipe that goes out to the Missouri or the Mississippi River or any other river in the state for large metropolitan areas. So we had a hard time trying to understand what kind of impact our plant had as far as water on St. Louis City, but now we know from the Dan River that these pollutants can travel pretty darn far.
So 70 miles, you're saying at the coal ash spill in North Carolina, the coal ash went 70 miles down the river.
Right.
And 70 miles
you
from...
You can visibly see it. So at the point where it dumped, it basically excoriated the side of the pond, went into the river, it's about 5 feet deep of coal waste. And then 70 miles down the river, it's about 8 inches. So you can actually measure it, and it's not only on the bottom of the river, it's up the sides of the river. So if you have a disaster like that, you can actually see where the pollution is. Unfortunately, with ours, with it sitting in the groundwater table, these things are invisible. So ions of arsenic and mercury, they're hard to see, and that makes it hard for the public to understand their risk. But what we know is that they readily move into water, and I would argue now that they probably move pretty far from the site. And we need more study of that.
Well, and you had, Gary, you had an issue with down in Festus when the river was low, didn't Festus pull public water out of some wells?
Well, Festus originally had well water, and then they went with a system with the city of Herculaneum where they get their water from the Mississippi River, which for me is a problem. I live in Festus, and we also have, our family has a family farm south of Festus, and now they get their water from deep wells, public wells. And so I've got two concerns. I'm concerned about my brothers and their wives and my mother that live on our 160-acre farm and get water from these wells that are in close proximity to Rush Island. And I'm just concerned that these contaminants will leach into the groundwater. And so that's a concern. And then with living in Festus, and my grandson lives with me and my daughter, and we get our, like I said, we get our public water in the town from the river. And from what Pat had told me and other people, and from my just checking around, these 3 power plants dump almost 50 million gallons of toxic water from their coal ash ponds per day into the Missouri, the Merrimack, and Mississippi. And this is just crazy. I mean, this does not make any sense to me, that you're polluting the water that you need, you know.
And that you're drinking.
And that you're drinking.
And not only drinking, but you boat on the river frequently, right?
Yeah, I'm a kayaker and I'm an avid fisherman. I'm in the Smallmouth Alliance and the Conservation Federation of Missouri, and did water quality testing for Stream Team. And I know what the ingredients are for a healthy river and a healthy stream. And as a fisherman, you understand this, because smallmouth, trout, all these different fish live off different insects and different forms of life in the rivers to proliferate. So it's just, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Well, and we have proof that it impacts the development of fish. And so some studies out of North Carolina showing deformed fish exposed to selenium that's in coal ash waste, elevated levels.
And I know when I'm down on the Mississippi River, I see people fishing from the riverbank all the time, and eating those fish that's downstream from Labadie and so many plants.
I've seen them fishing near the outflow from the Labadie plant.
Ooh, double bad. Okay, well, I know we could talk all night, but we're come to the end of our time. Thanks for watching, and tune in next week, same time, for the next episode of Green Time. And be sure to know where the coal ash is near your house before it spills. Thanks for joining us.